My name is Max, and this week I'm going to be streaming Candlelight with these two wonderful people. And so, if you want to introduce yourselves, Brian, let's start with you.
Uh, I'm Brian. I'm a wonderful person, but in the moment playing a deceased individual for Candlelight. What else do you need to know? Pronouns are he, and looking forward to seeing what Gabriel's created for us.
Excellent. And Heretic, how about you?
And what you
Hi,
pass
I
out
am
in
Heretic
Storytelling.
Soul. I am an aficionado of horror, tabletop RPGs, giant robots, etc. I will also be playing a deceased person tonight, and everything I've seen of this so far looks pretty cool, so I'm excited to dig into it.
So, unlike other Trophy Dark games that I've run, Candlelight is actually rooted in Trophy. And so it is its own game written by Gabriel Robinson and has very similar mechanics to Trophy Dark, but unique in their own way. And so you start as a character who has failed in a previous adventure. Whether that's a Trophy Dark character, or really you could be any character. But it is nice when you create a character that's very memorable in Trophy Dark because you can continue to play them after dark. And so Gabriel does a good job in this game of laying out the GM principles, the player principles. And so for players, uh, what's important is that the shock of your recent death is still sinking in. So fragmented amnesia and fragmented memories and hazy amnesia. And so this is described as fog of memory. And so to some extent throughout the course of this game, you are figuring out who you are and what happened to you. Also, flickering essence, you are vulnerable. You are still a fleeting memory. And so things here are risky in that they may extinguish what is left of you. And also anguished existence. So the horror of your recent death in this cursed place constantly threatens to overwhelm you with despair. And so you should use haunting and dirges to explore what it means to be ghost in limbo. And so similar to Trophy Dark, you will make a risk roll every time you attempt something risky or dangerous. And so, unlike Trophy Dark, here you don't have skills, you have memories. And so, if you have a related memory, you get a light die for that. And also, you don't have Devil's Bargains, you have Desperate Prayers. So, you get a light die if you take a Desperate Prayer. You also take a dark die if you are willing to risk your hold on the world to accomplish what you set forth to do. And if you are enacting a dirge or a flashback. And so flashbacks are a new mechanic added here in which you can recover some part of yourself. A dirge, so similar to Trophy, 1 to 3, it gets worse. 4 to 5, you succeed, but there is a complication. And 6, you succeed. And so if you roll the dark die and the result is equal to your highest light die, that is a reckoning. And so at times, echoes of your past memories will pain you. And so you will take a reckoning. And so then there's dirges, which are similar to rituals in Trophy Dark. And then reckonings, which are like ruin rolls. However, reckonings can give you either hope or despair. And so, unlike ruin rolls, where pretty much no matter what happens, your ruin either goes up or it doesn't, here, either your despair goes up or your hope goes up. And so, that means that you are kind of balancing the optimistic with the despairing, and your outcome depends on whether or not one of those 2 tracks reaches 6. And then when you rely on your mortal life for guidance, you may have a flashback when you make a risk roll. And so you can ask the table what happened here, what might have gone wrong. Other players may participate there. And so if this also faces their tragic past, you presumably had some association before you died. And so that's why you are traveling through the afterlife together. And so you can add dark dice to the shared roll. And the outcome is shared, right? And so whatever happens to all of you.
Okay.
And then you can also haunt, which is you channel your despair into the world around you. And so that is similar to a reduction roll in Trophy, but it looks a little different because in Trophy you are usually self-living, and so when you act to a reduction roll, you sabotage the people around you, and here this is mostly a change in tone, and things sound spooky. And so, yeah, there are different options. You can fade into the forest, you can merge with the light, and you can be between worlds. And so those are the 3 possible outcomes for Ghost, depending on what happens. I think that's mostly this. So the concept of this game is pretty similar, just to go through cats really briefly. Similar. It's really fairly simple. You are a ghost, looking to see what happens in these early phases of your afterlife. Aim, we want to find out what happens to you, and we want to flesh out what happened to you. And so this is not just about your outcome as a ghost, but also about what you went through as a character. Tone, this should be, it's horror, and it's about the horror of the world, but this is also about, to me, having read it, about grief. You're kind of mourning who your characters were. Concept, aim, and regardless, your ghosts are not necessarily expected to survive, and so we are really playing to find out what happens, and then we will be using the same safety tools that we always use. And so that is right now both the fact that we've talked, and I hope that you feel comfortable talking to me, and then also words as my brain momentarily freezes. Lines and veils. So do let me know if there is material that you don't want to include. Talked about before child abuse and sexual violence, and also I just will recently add death of a parent to that. I personally am not yet ready to explore that in a game context, and so that's more of a veil for me, but we'll see how that comes up, if it comes up. And then we also will use an X card, and so if something happens that is troubling and you need to take a break, please feel free to do so for any reason. And you can also say or type X in a place where I can see it, and we will take a step back. And so Candlelight can kind of be used to run any incursion backwards, and there are notes in the text of the game for how to do that. But this particular question, we are going to play Exodus, which is an introductory scenario included in the text of the game. And so, yeah. Are there any questions at this point?
Not a question, but I think having played a little bit of the trophy down the road, I'm going to miss a little bit of the nuance of haunt versus dirge. So I might need a little bit of help with Candlelight's rules for how the dice are a little different and the actions are a little different.
Okay. That's fair. Heretic, how about you?
I think the same for me. I assume some of this will become a little more apparent as we go along, but yeah, may have some mechanical questions down the line.
Fair enough. I guess I'm gonna take like a 2-minute break, and then we will go live. I'd say 2 minutes because I want to tweet this again. And then we're already live, but then I will start again and do character introductions first. Poor computer. I guess I will tweet this from my phone. There we go. So, tweet sent. Do you want to introduce your characters? Let's have... So, Heretic, let's have you introduce your character first.
Sure thing. My character simply goes by Torek, goes by he, him. In a prior life, he was a seeker and a hunter. Kind of lived his entire life as a child of the forest. but his doom is that he was sacrificed. And all of these things have kind of left a mark on him in this new afterlife.
And so, let's talk about your memories, I guess, right? So you had some adversarial relationship. Do you have ideas about that, or just that you know that you had an adversary?
I think the idea I have about that is that adversarial relationship is directly tied to his doom as a sacrifice. I didn't put too much thought into the sort of the people he kept company with, but I think that his being sacrificed was as much a way to get rid of an adversary or get rid of someone unwanted as it was just, a random act of violence in the name of ritual.
Fair. Interesting. And so your identity, it's just your identity and role, then?
Yeah, Torek did have relationships with people in his life, in the living world, but I think mostly was a wanderer and a bit of a hermit. So I think Torek's time spent in the forest, he is skilled in wandering. His time in the forest has given him skill as a hunter, which he was able to apply kind of as a trade.
And so your hope actually starts at 0. I'm sorry, I left it at 4, but
Easily corrected.
Yep. And so you start with the dirge Foxfire. So you can conjure an alluring light to follow. And you chose an additional dirge. So you can also wither, which means that your despair starts at 2.
All right.
And Brian, let's talk about your character.
All right. Heretic, just before I get into my character, I like the notion of a wanderer hermit who also has strong relationships. It's like this person you encounter in the wilds, and yet immediately there's a strong bond there. It's a neat impetus.
Thanks.
For Abelardo, the character I'm playing here, Abelardo's doom was to be burned. We'll find out how and why, I guess, as we play, hopefully. Memories include kinship, being skilled in oaths, an identity as a fighter, and a role as a priest. That might seem a little oxymoronic, but I'm kind of grabbing onto a real-life human being who lived in South America once, who was a real-life slaver who converted and tried to, in penance, join the Guarani and change their lifestyle. And so it seemed like an interesting persona to try and take on when I looked at what we had for relationships and identities here.
Interesting.
As far as drive, I'm going to see how this plays out. I want to embody myself in a powerful relic to be wielded in great deeds. Again, drawing on that real-life human who wrote a dictionary, whether that's my character, Abelardo's fate, who knows. And dirges include inhabit, possessing a person or animal, and howl, stirring or directing a restless wind. Does that put my despair at 3 or 2?
2.
2, okay.
I believe you start with 1 dirge no matter what. Interesting. So you're a priest, but you want to be embodied. And Tarek over here was a hunter, but he wants to look on the face of his deity.
Mm-hmm. We're set for success already. This is going to be great.
Yeah.
So deep in the heart of the dark forest, beneath snow-laden pine boughs, the last embers of a campfire cast a dim glow over broken bodies and blood-spattered snow. The air is still. The cold bodies of adventurers clutched their gleaming treasures, objects from their quest that did nothing to protect them. Only the ancient forest could have foreseen such an ending. For this is not the first group with an eye for gold, blinded by greed as they brushed aside the omens in their path. More lost souls, soon to join the many who haunt this place. But something glows in the darkness, a lingering hope of what could have been. And so, a heroic last stand, a descent into madness, or a sudden and tragic misfortune. The signs lay scattered across the forest floor. And the land will consume it all and heal old wounds with new growth. You are but a flickering consciousness, and the ink-black void threatens to swallow you. Moments ago, you lived, breathed, and struggled. Over what? You hover in nothingness, becoming aware of a body on the ground that was your own. It all seems so useless now. And so, where does Torik's previous body lay, and how is it arranged? Your doom was sacrificed.
Yeah, I think it lays atop an unadorned, just rough-hewn stone altar in the middle of the forest, somewhere grown over with vines. I think it's like just laid out flat, almost like spread eagle, with just again a simple sort of unassuming dagger in his chest.
So, just a plain steel dagger sticking out Torik's chest. What about Abelardo? How is his body arranged?
In the most quotidian manner, just laying over a hearth fire with someone's tea kettle still boiling, on the framework above the fire itself.
You find yourself at the heart of the forest, where many unfortunate souls spent their final moments. Their hopes and fears, and their anger and suspicion, mimic the twisted and layered roots of the forest floor. What treasure was worth risking your life over? What did Torik come here for? How was he bribed into the deep forest to be laid on this altar? What was he hoping to achieve?
I think I'm actually going to kind of draw from a previous character for that, and I think he was promised a hunt with a quarry unlike any he has seen before. Some creature spoke of in legend, and I think the opportunity for him was too good to pass up.
What about Abelardo? What did Abelardo come here in search of?
All right, so Heretic, tell me if I'm putting us too much in diametrical opposition right away, but what if I was the inverse? If I was here to preserve that being that Heretic was hunting?
I like that idea.
I like that too.
sort of the conservationist who met a poor end.
The echoes of your tragic deaths loom over you, the downward pull of despair ready to feed you to this ancient and vengeful place. The forest's grasp is powerful, eager to twist your greed and turmoil into another monstrosity that haunts its paths. But the spark within you pushes back against the gloom. How do you let go and leave your body behind? This is, what do you do? Here,
So is this sort of how are we pulled from or pulled into this afterlife?
Exactly, yes. How are you pulled into this afterlife?
For me, I've got it. That crackle, that noise you hear of fire.
Mm-hmm.
Each little pip and pop is a morsel of my being bursting into flame, dissipating in a flare of light, and that small whiff of smoke that goes up and dissipates. As it dissipates, that is the moment where my physical being translates to a spiritual place.
So you are embodying smoke. Yes. And you? Tarek? Sorry.
It's alright. For Torek, I think it is like he, at the moment when he realizes that he is going to be left dying on this altar, he has a sort of out-of-body experience, almost as though he is standing over the altar looking down upon himself. And after enough time passes, he finds he is, in fact, standing over the altar looking down upon himself. And I think the way that sort of manifests is, I mean, if we're talking sort of physical manifestation, I think he's like basically a dark shroud, under the hood of which is the skull of a stag, kind of now embodying the quarry he pursued in life.
So as you come into yourselves, you and separate from your body, you notice that there are people still moving among the bodies here. Torek, someone is going through your possessions, systematically breaking each of the arrows that you would have used to hunt this quarry. And Abelardo, another person is going through looking for any holy relics or books that you may have on your person and ensuring that they too burn. And so how do you stop them and take form as a spirit?
Ouch.
I am... Yeah. And I am asking for a risk roll here.
So help me with Candlelight in terms of trophy here. If somebody's gonna take my books that I worked so hard to create and burn them, I feel like a full-blown dirge is merited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so dirges, you may use dirges the way you do rituals. So it is a risk roll, just like it would be in trophy, and a dirge is just like a risk roll, right? So if you want to stop these people from looting your body and burning your books, if you have any memories or dirges, you can do that. And also you may make a desperate prayer, which is a devil's bargain.
Thank you. Okay. Alright, sorry. Looking at memories. I feel like I've got an oath to protect these written words. And
Yeah.
in terms of Dirge's despair, to me, a spiritual howl of anguish, kind of blasting across the pages, fluttering them, seems apropos.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Is that a light and a dark?
Yep, that's one light and one dark, unless you would like a desperate prayer. Or unless you would like to put yourself and your spirit at risk in order to preserve these books.
Not yet. If desperate prayers are devil's bargains, I believe I'm waiting for either of you to give me a desperate prayer.
Yeah, so... you know what? I think that as you howl in anguish, you're gonna knock this guy into the fire, and his spirit may or may not follow you into the afterlife.
Nice.
That's pretty good. I don't think I have one that tops that.
Yeah, I'm gonna blast him right into the fire. It sounds too good. I want to know what happens.
Okay. So 2 light and 1 dark.
2 light, 1 dark. Sorry, / risk in terms of.
Yep.
Ooh, 6 in the dark.
Excellent. So a 6 on the dark.
So
you blast this guy into the fire, and let's look at the risk roll rules again, because to be honest, I think this is a reckoning moment where we figure out. But yeah, your despair would increase.
Slightly bad about blowing this being into the flames, but only a little bit bad.
So, right, okay, risk roll. You are a flickering spirit, a candle in the wind, your journey is perilous. If you rolled a dark die and the result is equal to or higher than your highest light die, treat it as a reckoning. And so, a reckoning, if it's lower than your current despair, you increase your hope by 1. If it's higher than your current despair, you increase your despair by 1. And so in this case, you increase your despair by 1. And I think, right, like you howled in desperation and anger as this guy was going through and throwing your books into the fire. And so I think that the woods around you are never quite quiet after this. That as you walk through the woods, you can hear the whispering kind of preceding your presence. The echoes of your first howl of despair. And I also believe as your despair goes up, you get another dirge. And so, Tarek, how about are you going to step forward to defend your arrows from desecration by...
I am, and I think I'm also going to use a dirge to do that, to try to scare off, frighten off whoever it is that is snapping these arrows. I think that's going to be Wither to reduce all of the basically anything living around this altar to ash and rot.
Okay, that seems reasonable. So you want to reduce him to ash and rot. And do you have relevant skills? This seems almost like a challenge?
It does. So I could use a quick refresher on how that applies here.
So here, memories are skills. So you get a light die if you have a relevant memory. And in this case, I think you rising as a ghost from your sacrificial altar to defeat the person desecrating your belongings seems like your memory of adversary is relevant.
Okay, so that would be one light and one dark then, so far.
Yes. And I guess we can think about desperate prayers. I already have one ghost following you. And you do want to reduce him to ash and rot. I think this is loud in a way it never would have been in life. Right? That the spiritual destruction wrought by this dirge is going to draw attention.
Sure, I like that.
Okay. So then that would be 2 light and 1 dark.
Alright, let's go. Highest is a 6 on the light, followed by a 2 light, 5 dark.
Excellent. So, great success. He disintegrates as you howl at him from beneath your black cowl, shattering into little fragments and blots of light as his soul separates from its body and is in turn disintegrated. And this is loud. You can hear it echo through the forest in a way that even the howl did not. This is not sound. This is echoing on a frequency you do not believe you have ever heard before. And I believe your hope increases by 1. Because you rolled a 6 on the right die. And so here I think the little fragments of this man's soul follow you in a halo of glimmering dust. So even as your antlers poke out from behind this black cowl, your hoofprints leave little glowing dust-filled patches in the earth. And so ancient, ruinous, and always the guardians of this place suffer none to pass. Even in the afterlife's shadow, they mark the passage of your faint life sparks. Attracted by Tarek's wither, you feel a monstrous presence all around you. Something waits in the darkness, just beyond your flickering perception. Maybe you escaped its grasp when you had a body that could run, climb, and desperately claw its way through the undergrowth. Maybe your encounter with it left you mortally wounded as you began your final doomed descent into the heart of this forest. Describe its features, making it clear that this was a threat that you had little hope of overcoming. And so I am going to suggest this. You were here in search of a quarry, Tarek, and Ardo was here to defend said quarry. And so I can't demand a flashback, but I would recommend a flashback. It seems like maybe this thing is this spectral manifestation of that quarry that you came here in search of, or to defend.
So, once again, a quick point of clarification. So the flashback would effectively be...
It's another risk roll. But here the outcomes are a little bit different. And so... sorry, let me find... ask the table what happened here and what might have gone wrong. So this is when you rely on your mortal life for guidance, you may have a flashback by making a risk roll. Ask the table what happened here, what might have gone wrong, and so here you want to know what this presence is in the darkness. And other players may participate by adding a dark die for facing their tragic past. All characters involved in the role are affected by the highest result, so you can use memories and dirges just like you would for any other risk roll. On a 1 to 3, things went terribly wrong. This may call for a reckoning. 4 to 5, you learn something that complicates the circumstances. On a 6, you receive 1 hope and recall something useful about the present challenge. If the dark die is equal or higher than your despair, you raise your despair by 1.
So, Heretic, tell me a little more about this quarry you were pursuing.
Yeah, let's see. I think it is something... I mean, I think it is the oldest thing in this forest. Or said to be at least. Something that has... maybe even predates it, and that has kind of watched over it. I think perhaps the thought of tracking, whether killing it or not, but the thought of just tracking and finding something that old and something that unknowable would be, once again, just too good an opportunity to pass up for Torek's own pride.
Amazing amount of hubris too. I like it.
If I may add one additional twist to that, I wonder if I cannot help but wonder if perhaps this being is also the same being that Torek was sacrificed to, ultimately.
I like that a lot.
Yep.
And so... yeah, I guess let's make this risk roll, and let's see how that goes.
Sure. So that's 1 light die just for the risk?
That would be 1 light die if you have any relevant memories. And so your memories are challenge... tracking?
If we take adversary and challenge, if I'm out there defending this being and you're out there trying to hunt it down and capture or murder it, we're just all adversary from here to the end of the world. But
yeah, I mean, I certainly think adversary might be relevant. I will say that tracking might be relevant. You are uncovering the remains of some great beast.
Yeah. Okay, so that would be 2 light die then for skilled challenge and skilled tracking.
Yep.
Super. And quick refresher, any dark dice or anything anyone like?
You will get an extra dark die if Abelardo thinks that this also affects his memories, but if so, then you will both be affected by the outcome of the roll. And you can also have a dark die if you have any relevant dirges.
I'm totally on board with intertwining our memories, especially I like the notion of a sort of an oppositional nature. Again, if you don't like that, we can shoot that down. But
No, I'm into that. So perhaps at some point, our Bowman range kind of cross paths here. All right, so 2 light, 1 dark. Here we go. Highest is a 5 light.
So that means that you learn something that complicates things. And so you were tracking a quarry. What sort of quarry do you think that you usually tracked? Like, do you think that this is a giant elk? Or do you think that this may be something unlike anything else?
I think that the quarry that Torek usually tracks are either for food or something that in some way has been deemed to threaten people around the forest. Whether that's an animal that has gone rabid and is attacking wildlife, or just a pack of wolves that perhaps a village doesn't want around. But I think this quarry, I do like the idea of it kind of being something told of in stories as something like some giant primordial elk, but perhaps with odd effects. Like, imagine an elk with 8 legs and 6 antlers, and a mouth that can speak like the mouth of a human.
Yeah. Imagine
beneath the river.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think as you step out of your bodies and begin to look around, having defeated those scavengers that would go through and desecrate your belongings, Torek, you look up, and as your cowl falls away from your antlers, you hear the creaking of tree branches, and emerging from the woods comes a matching set of antlers. However, while first you see what looks like an 8-foot tall antlered beast, you realize that under each tree's shadow there is a mirrored copy of this thing. That this is not one single quarry, but rather can manifest in every shadow at any choice, especially here in the heart of this forest at this plain stone altar. How did you evade the terror of this beast so long, and how does it continue to stalk you now?
So does this involve an additional flashback?
No, this is just a question.
Okay. This is in the present. I'm going to say, as someone who was, again, kind of a perpetual child of the forest and preferred to live on their own, I think Tarek's identity as a seeker helps him here. I think he knows how to find less trodden paths and hidden ways through the trees and the underbrush.
So you evaded it by simply minimizing your impact on the forest? Sorry, this was a question and not a
Yes. Yeah, I think Torek is at home in the forest, and so is as I think part of me thinks it doesn't even match. Like, Torek is as able to evade notice as this thing is to track him.
And how... Well, does Abelardo feel at the manifestation of this great beast from each of the shadows of the trees around you?
You know that shadow beneath a rock? Like there's a rock that you're thinking, I'll lift that rock up and look what's beneath there. In this moment, I am diminished. I am that shadow. This is not what I hoped for from the forest. This is not what I hoped for from my work and life. And clearly not what I hoped for in my afterlife. It seems like all things are going to miss in this moment.
In a quiet place, through the trees, you see a spattering of mist, and you can hear the rushing of water. And you remember the story that this great beast slept beneath the water of the river, and you see signs of this waterfall. In the heart of the forest, a place where any great beast might have slept. This, if you had only been able to get to that waterfall and take the skull from the skeletal elk that sleeps beneath, perhaps you could have controlled this dark forest guardian, even in the face of certain death. You were calculating the risks. Abelardo, what opportunity did you seize?
Seized, you said?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what opportunity did you take?
In this mist, in my semi-corporeal form, becoming just part of the atmosphere, I want to lift this elk skull from the sort of liquid chasm that it was descending into.
I think that's a risk roll.
Okay.
These shadowy elk certainly do not want you to do so. To desecrate the body of their progenitor. So I think if you wanted to do that, we can talk about light and dark dice.
Right. This may be a stretch to shoot it down, but my drive is to embody myself within a powerful relic, to be able to do great deeds. And if I can jam my spiritual essence into an elk skull that got pulled out of a watery, misty mass, that seems great. And as a priest, I'm good at hymns, so let me, come up with a...
And you were here to defend this forest guardian. And so perhaps you are acting in service to it, or believe you are, even now.
Hopefully. I certainly believe that. Whether Tarek feels the same way or not is possibly very much on the table.
So yeah, I would let you use hymns, because I would say that this perhaps is part of a religious practice, and although you have never done it with the real thing before, this is a familiar act.
Regarding Candlelight, I like that notion of having never done it with the real thing before. That's pretty much Candlelight in essence, I think.
Fair.
I've never done it before. Let me try this now.
Amen.
Yeah, and so that's one light die for hymns. I guess, are you gonna use a ritual? Sorry, a dirge, like and you can have a third dirge because your despair is 3.
So, all right, pardon me. In Candlelight, do you pick up dirges as you go along?
Yeah,
I didn't know.
at least I think so.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
All right.
I suppose we can ask Gabe in a minute.
I'm not gonna delay the
Gabriel, sorry.
storytelling right now, but between inhabit and howl, I could see a notion of trying to inhabit some portion of my persona into this skull, and or pull a bit of it back towards me and try and harmonize our deceased essences.
Okay. So inhabit, and then let's see, desperate prayers.
I have an idea for that.
Yeah?
With inhabit. That is that you use inhabit to kind of tie some aspect of your persona to this, but regardless of the outcome, some part of you is bound to it now.
Oh yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. That's terrific.
So
is that a risk 1-2, 1 light, 2 dark?
No, that would be a risk 2-1 because the desperate prayer gives you a light die.
Oh, okay, thank you. 5 light is high, 2 dark is low.
Let's see, 5 light. So that does mean you can reroll and add a dark die if you would like. And 5 light when you are binding yourself to this elk skull. Let's think. You succeed. There is a complication.
Well, there was I'm sorry, the devil's bargain is not the right phrase.
Desperate prayer.
Desperate prayer, thank you. I believe I accepted that desperate prayer that a part of me is tied to this.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Deceased elk being.
I think as you bind to the elk skull, you hear the stampeding of hooves as each of the shadow manifestations of this elk being run towards you, charge you, their horns down. And so even as you bind yourself into this elk skull, you feel the anger of this place at the desecration of you tying yourself to this monster. The hubris involved that you, a priest of this being, might occupy the original body, the original relic of this monster. Toric, you were standing still in a clearing, watching the shadowy antlered forms emerge from the forest around you. And actually, Abelardo, I want you to make a ruin roll as these are stampeding towards you.
Okay. 4.
So that is higher than your current despair, which is 3, and so your despair goes up by 1. And so this was actually a reckoning. If it had been lower than your despair, your hope would have gone up by 1. So you get hope for essentially failing a ruin roll, or for rolling a 6. And so, Tarek, you see the stampede of these antlered figures, and they are going to rush through you and past you, and you yourself feel the desire to charge Abelardo, to lock horns with him, as he dares to possess this holy relic. What do you do?
That's a good question. I think at the very least I follow the stampede to see where they're running to and what the source of this compulsion is.
Yeah, so you merge with the stampede. Just one more antlered figure running among the shadowy figures of the others, except that your footprints are filled with this spectral light of the man who thought he could break your arrows. How about you make me a risk roll to maintain your individual identity in the force of this monstrous presence and all-encompassing presence, right? You are giving yourself into the herd of that very thing that you were here to fight. And so, how about you roll for it?
All right. So you said risk roll. I don't know if I have anything that would give me a... Do you have anything that would give me a light die?
So let me go see.
You're skilled in tracking and monitoring. Is your deity?
Tracking, maybe.
Or this is maybe a push of your church, but Foxfire.
Well, that. I think that would be a dark die, because dirges give you dark dice, just as rituals would in Trophy Dark.
And all of a sudden, I'm envisioning is that thus far I've felt sort of a spiritual opposition to your persona being here, and I'm picturing these forest elk that I assumed I was allied with, and one of them, as it's charging forward, leaves in its hoof prints arrows flocked into the earth and puddles of blood, and I am just questioning my entire being as you charge forth with this herd.
Let's see. Can I call on?
I will give you a light die for challenge, for adversary.
Okay. I was gonna ask, can you call upon drive for a light die as well?
Drive? No. I think that's thematic. Just as it is in Trophy Dark.
Okay, yeah. Challenge sounds good for light die. Also open to a possible desperate prayer.
As Abelardo can never fully leave this skull behind, you will always be aware of your flock, your new herd of other antlered specters.
Well, I mean, I'm a sucker for that, so sure.
Okay. So 2 light dice.
There are arrows in your footprints forevermore. Whether you're physically present or not, there's an arrow lodged in the earth.
Yeah. I think I'll take the desperate prayer that I'll be... Some part of me will always belong to this herd now.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, so I think that's 1 light, 1 dark.
Yep.
Let's go. Let's try that.
Oh, wait, no. That was 2 light. So, you have to unless you're risking yourself.
Cool. 2 light, 0 dark.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say highest is a 3.
You can add a dark die and reroll.
I think I'll do that.
It seems
Ooh, I see. Is the dark just 5 this time?
Yeah. So you, one, your despair goes up by 1, and you can gain a new dirge, because this is a reckoning. Your highest die was a dark die, and 5 is higher than your current despair. 2, let's see. So you charge forward. Your hoof prints full of glowing light. But other than that, the ground beneath your hooves begins to mold. Even as you are aware of your flock and acting in accordance with their desire. Sorry, your herd. I suppose elk have herd flocks. And acting in accordance with their desire. There is something corrupted about your presence here. You are becoming monstrous. What other denizen of the winter wood had such a corrupting effect?
And is this called flashback? Okay.
Are you taking another flashback?
I guess I'm just sort of, is this just asking something to kind of like flesh out the narrative space around Torek?
Yeah.
Okay, actually, I would like to take a flashback if that.
Yeah,
if that works.
absolutely. Sure.
Okay.
So that's a risk roll. I don't know if Abelardo is going to be as relevant here, but Abelardo, you are welcome to participate.
I think it's pretty simple. I think several winters ago, the forest, or the edges of the forest where people dared to tread and live, were plagued first by rot, and then by the arrival of a bird of carrion, a massive vulture that seemed as though a harbinger of this desecration and would assault human and prey on livestock alike. I think that is one of the quarry that Tormek has hunted in the past.
Cool. So, do you have memories that are relevant to this this flashback? I think Hunter is the relevant memory here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the obvious one. So I would say Hunter.
Okay. So that would be one light up for this flashback for that. Now let's see what you learn. I think that's how flashbacks work. They're just for scrolls.
It is a 5.
So what happened here and what might
Tell me
happen?
if I'm off base, but you remember that time you were hunting this sort of carrion crow, this vulture, and exhausted took a nap and awoke to find another one pecking out one of your eyes, leaving you blind in one eye.
Ooh. I do like that.
Also, do you remember how when you did finally pierce the heart of this great vulture with your arrow, it exploded into rot nearby forest floor, catching and perhaps infecting those who came after it.
I do remember that. I think that drove Torek further into isolation as that section of the woods became uninhabitable, though the bird had been felled. The people who had called on Torek for help were forced to leave their homes nevertheless. And Torek was left to rot in the woods once more.
Cool. I like that a lot. I am going to suggest that this is the end of Ring 2, essentially, or the second gate. And so let's take a brief pause. So bio break if you need one. And also, I'm going to invite Gabriel into the voice chat, and so he can tell us about his inspiration behind writing this game. So.
Excellent.
Hello. Apparently I am barking mad. So, I guess Gabriel's muted right now.
Oh, yep, I'm here.
Hello. How are
Hello.
you?
Good. How you doing?
It's good.
Yeah, I always have your question is taste, but
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Spent way too long doing the most mundane of tasks, and am now having fun playing a horror game. So
Yeah.
So this has been good fun so far. Kind of the how did you die element of this game. I think it's been fun to collaboratively do some scene setting, and it's interesting how similar and how different Candlelight is to just Trophy Dark, right? And so thank you for the way that you wrote in the rules and you actually put their Trophy Dark names for things, because it's nice to be able to say something like, oh no, this is just a devil's bargain, it's okay. Like,
Yeah, I was hoping that would be useful to all the people who know Trophy, but also don't really know the average person picking it up. So yeah.
And so I said kind of during Cats, so when I was talking about the tone, I was talking that to me there's an element of mourning in this game, right? Like you are lamenting that which came before a little bit. Is that an intentional inclusion?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I love about Trophy, period, is just tragic, flawed characters. And I think it'll be interesting to start with that. And I realize that's a lot of character and world building on the front end. But I think it's interesting to start out that way, and you have so much to build off of. Like, what's if the worst has already happened? You've died. Then what else lingers with you? And there's a lot to kind of lean into and build on. Hopefully.
I think it's an interesting game. I realized that when you wrote it, we hadn't really gone into pandemic mode, or when you started writing it, right? Certainly when you launched your Kickstarter for it, we hadn't really gone into pandemic mode yet. And it's interesting because, I guess I haven't seen how much discussion there is about this, but the way that pandemic certainly changed my relationship with horror. And it's this, but anyway, what I'm getting at is the statement of what lingers with you. Like, after everything else has stopped, what elements of your life do you still have? I think is an interesting, it's almost, it's thematic for real world. And so this game is it's rooted in Trophy Dark. And it's certainly very inspired by the world of Trophy and the writing of Trophy. And so I was wondering if you wanted to share what you like about Trophy Dark as a system itself, and what about that you find most inspiring.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so yeah, like I mentioned, number one, what I love about it is it's kind of the opposite of your fantasy tropes. It's not a game of heroic characters that just go in and pillage and take all the treasure and they're the good guys. It completely subverts all of that and kind of questions that and says from the start, your character is going into a place that doesn't want you here, and it's going to kill you and claim you or drive you out. I just really love that sort of, introspective kind of horror where you're that's what's scariest, is these characters realizing how doomed they are. And I think just that eco-gothic kind of horror that I've seen people talk about really appeals to me. You're just kind of rooting for nature to win, and to me that's writing and playing this game has been a way to vent, I guess, about a lot of current events.
Yeah,
it's just a nice relief in a way.
I can see that. I think it's interesting. I always like the questions that are put into things, but how are you becoming monstrous? Like this denizen of the winter woods being just a direct quote from the reckoning section of the second gate in Exodus. I think it's how are you interrupted by that around you is again one of those things I don't want to be like, oh, this is like a real world question, but it's certainly a real world question to me.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it's the way I look at it and the way it's built into the game, I guess, is again, the worst has happened to these characters, and that's their own venting, literally. They're just kind of crying out in rage and trying to change the world around them how they can, even though they're very fragile and broken and maybe doomed. But again, you know, in the game concepts, it talks about moving through the darkness to find light. So it is sort of a horror game, but I almost don't know if I succeeded at it being a horror game, because there's a lot of hope in it. Like, all the terrible things that happen to you are a source of maybe other skills you can gain, in other ways you can like find something new in it and transform yourself.
It's a thing. So I did this with Witch's Tower a little bit unsuccessfully. Well, successfully and unsuccessfully. But it's a thing that, like, I like about Trophy is that the game ends sort of when everybody reaches 5 or 6 ruin, but your character's story doesn't really end necessarily when you reach 6 ruin. I like the becoming part of the forest theme, where it's like you might still be around, you've just been reduced to some base component. And in that case, I think, like, I like conceptualizing the roles as like you versus the forest. Like, does the forest's agency win, or does yours? And so I don't know.
It's kind of delightful in a way when it transcends that too, because at least out of character, I'm rooting for the forest. Like, I want the Ents to win, you know, the trees to take over. And then when your character becomes lost to the forest, like when I play Trophy Dark, I love starting with more rituals and higher ruin so that I can get to that reduction roll part. Yeah. And just start doing things in service of the forest. It's just super fun. So I like the idea that, and I haven't really got to play this enough to see how it goes, but if the players get lots of manifestations of their hope and despair and kind of describe how they're, you know, are they just a scarier ghost? Are they becoming some other form? But what does it look like when you become a guardian of the forest, you know?
I think, you know, it's so a game that was really influential for me was Bluebeard's Bride, and Bluebeard's Bride gives you the directive to, like, pay attention to what people describe and assume that they are telling you something else, right? And so I have really enjoyed in this playthrough of Exodus kind of how much detail has been added just because of the incidental things. Like, you know, at no point in Exodus do you talk about elk or antlers, but we have a character, Torek, who was here in search of a quarry, and so a lot about the monster so far has been defined by what sort of beast Torek would have been hunting, and he himself described his ghost as having antlers, and so we have this kind of recurring theme. And I enjoy to some extent how minimal, how much room there is for players to define what the monster is here, and is it then?
Yeah. And I could go on forever about trophy stuff too, but I think that's the other thing I really love about the system and the writing is it being based around that theme, because there's so much symbolism that starts to come out and you don't have to force it at all. Like, you just start describing these moments and asking certain questions of the players, and like everyone starts to get on the same level, and like it's crazy how the same imagery starts to come up and how everything connects. Like, every game I played has managed to do that. It's horrifying and beautiful to see.
Yeah. I really like also the way you like reskinned the skills. So I really like the kind of the central relationship force has come up a couple times already. So, you know, the characters having kind of preset or not preset, but like seeding their memories and their relationships with this, you know. One character chose adversary, Torek again, and like how adversarial almost all of his interactions have been so far, because that is partly how he was defined, right? And so I think you did a really kind of, it's very evocative the way that you changed that.
I'm glad
so.
that's working well.
Mm-hmm.
I think as I was getting into writing a game about ghosts, a couple other games that kind of came to mind were, I mean, all of the games by Jamila Najati, Sword Queen games, but especially I think one called Our Haunt, which is, you know, a game about being ghosts haunting a place, and then also one of Pamu's games, Sundo. So games that went much more in depth about the afterlife, but just even reading those briefly kind of gave me the prompt of like, you have to get a little more into some of those themes. I don't want it to just to be horror because you're dead and you're a ghost, but more any character who may have been a hero before, like when they've died, and again what they have left, like what's meaningful to them. So like it doesn't matter if you're a powerful warrior now, you're a little ghost light. So what still resonates for you? And I think it's hopefully a good opportunity to explore that, especially if you're bringing in a character from another game that died, and then you can look at a whole other side to them potentially. Like, sure, they were a warrior, but you know, they were someone's parent, or they had always wanted to be a poet or something like that. And when your physical skills don't really matter in the same way, like it opens up, hopefully.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So Brian or Heretic, do either of you have questions you want to talk to Gabriel about?
Questions, no, but just gigantic for a round of applause, honestly, to look at where we are as humans and bust that down to look at where we play most of our role-playing games, and then pull it back 2 or 3 steps and say, all right, once you're gone, what happens next is just breathtaking, frankly.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I guess I do have one question, which is the mechanic so far that I found interesting is whereas trophy functions effectively on one stat, and that is your ruin. You know, here we have despair and hope, and I was kind of curious, I guess, just where that came from.
Yeah, one thing I do credit in the game is Quietus by Ollie Jeffrey, and it's a different one-shot horror game where the game can end in hope or despair, although it's probably skewed towards despair. So if your character manages to kind of escape the scenario, when your hope gets to the highest level, that's what happens. But there's always a danger of either one happening. Originally when I was writing it, it still had ruin in there. As more complicated than it needed to be. It was sort of a different stat affecting hope and despair.
Yeah.
And our friend Michael Van Vliet was looking at it at some point and just was like, you don't actually need ruin in here, so I just made it despair. But the idea being, this is hopefully like a tragic melancholy game, but it's not necessarily doomed. Like, I don't know if it's actually horror, honestly, because of the hope part. So it hopefully pushes that story to where if you find ways to like find meaning and transform what happened before the game started, that can be the outcome too. But then the temptation is always there to sort of give into your despair and become more monstrous.
I like that like despair has a mechanical advantage to you. You get rituals essentially, so you get dirges as your despair goes up, right?
Yeah.
And
you lose them when it goes down.
Yeah. So there's a mechanical advantage to having higher despair, despite not, right, like, so, and there's no mirroring advantage for hope. So there's almost just an incentive to kind of snowball into despair because it's mechanically better.
Right. Yeah, I also gotta credit Michael for helping with those mechanics, but I think one idea behind that too is to encourage role playing. Same with the basically the reduction rule when you're haunting and doing ghostly things. Hopefully that gives the players incentive to use those things as much as possible and build the theme of, this forest is full of other ghosts and you're about to become one of them. So here's all the scary ways you can inhabit the forest and drive off other intruders. It kind of builds the world that way, hopefully.
Cool. Well, thanks for talking to us about this game. So, sorry, anything else you want to share before we move on? I guess you're trollhands.itch.io, right? So, if anybody...
glowingroots.itch.io.
Sorry, thank you.
Trollhands on Twitter, yep.
Trollhands on Twitter, glowingroots.itch.io. So, if you want to check out this game or any other games by Gabriel, you should check out that. I highly recommend it. And also, in Codex Leviathan, which is the most recent issue of Codex Zine, there is in fact a trophy gold incursion by Gabriel. So, if kind of these themes and this game design perspective appeal to you, check that out. Anything else that we should talk about on your behalf? While you're here?
No, those are the ones. I have a few incursions in the upcoming trophy books, which I hope you like. Had a lot of fun writing them, and thanks so much for running this. I look forward to starting from the beginning and hearing it later.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks for talking to us, and yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. have a good evening. Cool. So. We ended the second gate with Abelardo in the center of this stampede of hooves, firmly tied to this elk skull, and Torek, participant in the stampede of beasts. However, one who still maintains his individual identity. And we had a flashback there at the end in which we described a separate beast of the forest, a carrion crow that spread a rot which has begun to infect Torek's footprints so that the ground around him is rotted. And we determined that that is part of what led to Torek's isolation, that he had received this monstrous wound from a carrion crow that pecked out his eye, and that then when he defeated this rotting vulture, he too became infected with the rot, and as did the land around, so that he felt that he had failed the people who had hired him and left society so as not to further infect them. Am I correctly summarizing that flashback?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to make it look really accusatory, I can play the role of sort of defensor of the forest here. No, I shall, in the end, be victim of my own hubris in trying to defend this very forest.
Yeah, so I think it's about time to circle back on Abelardo's first desperate prayer. Abelardo, as he was separating from his body, gave a howl of rage upon seeing someone attempting to burn his holy books. And I believe that that person's spirit has now become manifest. And so here in the third gate, you remember that you came here hopeful, joined in steady purpose, sharing of stories of past exploits and life back home. I want to know who this person was to you before he tried to burn your holy books.
Oh, the one I howled into oblivion?
Yes. As the stampede fades, just to see the scene a little bit more, you see that more time has passed than perhaps you realized. Once more, you see the campsite, but the fire in which Abelardo's body was burning is long cold and offers no warmth. Wild beasts have picked the camp, and your body is clean from scraps, leaving no morsel or bone behind. Any form of shelter or comfort that you may have shared is absent. The tea kettle that had been boiling over the hearth is knocked askew, and what tea had been in it is a frozen stain on the surface of the snow. And so there is a new ghost, not yet as tangible as you and Torek. And who was he?
This was my most promising acolyte, the one that I hoped would take my works and carry them forward. And yet, in moments bound by physical duress, chose to burn our life's works, these books. And in the sense that this tea kettle has gone cold and the herbs within it have dried up for lack of attendance over years, I in a bitter, gross way, kind of wish that upon their soul. They should have been there for me in that moment, and they were not.
Torek? Why did you poison the tea?
Because
this tea that was never drank.
Because I had an aim. I suppose even in death, it's unclear if Torek intended to fell his quarry once he found it, or if this was just a manifestation of his drive to look upon the face of his deity, and he was not going to let a preservationist stand in the path of that.
What evidence of the poison is there now that the contents of the tea kettle have been dried and scattered over the ground?
Leaves that have no business being in tea.
Perhaps these were the last moments of shared warmth you experienced. Did you trust each other that night?
Oh, yes. I fully believed that you were there to bring forth our beneficent cause, and did not see the sort of hunter's gleam within your eye.
And here is the spirit of your acolyte, Abelardo. Who else might wait for you and carry the memory of your religion? And will they come looking for your holy texts?
The acolyte had her younger sister, Ignacia. And she always seemed a bit apart from her teachings, sort of sitting just out of earshot, but not quite. seemingly never paying attention, and yet it seemed like maybe she was soaking this all in. She truly believed.
So do you think she will one day venture after you into the forest?
Speaking as a spirit, I honestly hope that she comes to reclaim me instead and can put my spirit to better use by embodying me within some physical relic, maybe this elk skull here.
Which you cannot leave behind. What about you, Torek? You were something of a hermit and you lived alone in the woods. Will anyone miss you?
Perhaps. I don't know that Torek hopes to be missed, though.
Yeah? What do you think Torek hopes?
I mean, in my mind, Torek is a bit of a vengeful spirit, so I think anyone he thinks of, he hopes chokes on their tea leaves and rots.
Which is great given my earlier notion of a charismatic being who you happen upon in the woods, and now it's just like, nope.
Now, Torek is increasingly becoming the adversary in all of these interactions. No, I don't think he'll be missed.
Somewhere, there is a rotted town in which Torek is a swear word. And the memories of him will be as a failed hunter and not any sort of hero. In the distance, the first few hints of dawn highlight the first dense canopy. The night is almost through, and you have yet to find a way beyond its grasp. The forest guarded its secrets as best it could against trespassers, and it gives you no quarter now. You see a roaming priest of a rival sect stride deeper into the forest, swinging a censer which burns with fearsome smoke, and whispering hymns of banishment. What do you do?
Let's team up with that priest.
Sounds good to me. I mean, I have a thought, but I feel like I've had the spotlight a lot, so I'm willing to kind of give you.
Oh, really?
Right
Interesting. I don't feel that way at all. We can definitely sort of mend our past moments in opposition to expel this priest from the area that you and I once called home. I can, with veil, hide an object from spirits. Am I hiding the object from the? Can I literally hide the forest from this transgressor? Can I just make them feel like they're wandering an empty void?
I like that. So it's not that you are trying to conceal or give this priest the wrong idea. You are simply trying to make them feel like they are irreparably lost.
Yes, they walked into an empty, flat plain and do not know why they came here.
Okay. Sure. So that's a risk roll. I suppose these are rival hymns, so perhaps your skill in hymns is relevant here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Makes
one
sense.
light and one dark.
Pardon me again. What is the name for Devil's Bargains and Candlelight?
Desperate prayer.
Desperate Prayer. And the Desperate Prayers.
I think I'm trying to come up with something involving the censer. That there is this noxious smoke, and you manifested first as a curl of smoke from a spark popped through your body. And so I think perhaps this smoke attracts and conceals and encompasses your form. You cannot stray too far from this elk skull, but I think the smoke of this censer will become necessary for you to manifest.
Ouch, but that's good, narratively speaking. Any other options on the table? Help me out, Herda, please.
Boy. I do not have another suggestion for a desperate prayer. I forget exactly how the rules govern this, though. Is sort of collaborative risk rolling a possibility?
No.
Okay.
Flashbacks can be collaborative, but yeah.
Sorry, what was that, Brian?
I was just asking if you could give me some, secondary howl of appeasement to make this more appalling to this transgressor.
I mean, I have a possibility, which is that one of my dirges is Foxfire.
Ooh.
I think what I can effectively do is, I think the way that looks is Torek kind of like under the shroud holds his hands wide and brings them close together, and as he does so, the light around him seems to fade, but between his palms a small spark begins to glow, and with a sudden motion he claps his hand, and in the kind of the smoke of this noxious smoke of this censer, in the distant dark, swinging lights as though of other sensors can be seen around this clearing.
I like that a lot, and I think I may ask for a risk roll depending on how this one goes.
I like them both. So if I accept the bargain, if you will, that my essence is essentially imbued with a sensor.
Mm-hmm.
2 light, 1 dark. Yes.
Yes.
6 in the light, 3 on the light, and 2 in the dark.
Excellent. So your hope goes up by 1. And let's think about how that manifests. And so I think 1. Okay. So you are trying to hide the forest from this priest.
Yes.
And you become trapped in the smoke of the censer. And I think you do, like, as you get close, you see bone charms of entrapment hung throughout the smoke of this censer. But I think as you do this, right, you hide the eyes of this priest, you veil the forest such that all he can see is gray smoke from the censer. But in the meantime, to you, in the spirit world, that smoke looks like flittering silver butterflies, of which you are but one.
That's nice.
And I think, Tarek, you were talking about using foxfire to conjure an alluring light, and so to make mirroring sensors to fill the trees all around. And I think right now you have a very lost priest who you could lead almost any direction with an alluring light. So is there something you want to do there?
I think this would kind of coincide with Abelardo's goals. I think I do want to lead him as though in a procession, just away from the deep forest.
What will you be doing about the elk skull?
Apologies. Remind me how the elk skull is in play.
Because Abelardo cannot separate from it. And so Abelardo right now is stuck because he can only manifest near the smoke from the censer. Or he can best manifest near the smoke from the censer, but he cannot leave the elk skull.
I see.
And so I'm really asking, will you pick it up and carry it with you and lead this priest away from the forest?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, let's see. I feel like wandering is a relevant skill here. Like, you are leading this rival priest in a procession through the woods. And so I think you would get a light die from wandering, and you were going to use the foxfire skill, or the foxfire dirge, so that's a dark die.
All right. And I'm open to a desperate prayer as well here.
This other acolyte will similarly follow you.
Oh, the living acolyte.
No, well, I thought that you were leading the acolyte with the censer by making it look as though there were others. But I mean the spiritual one that had tried to burn Abelardo's books.
Got it.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Okay.
So that's 2 light, 1 dark.
Mm-hmm.
Phew. 2 5s on the light, but a 6 on the dark.
So your despair goes up by 1. You get another dirge. And let's see. What might that look like for you? I think living creatures flee your presence. That you, this antlered cow figure with the ground molding around you and hoof prints that glow behind you into the woods, are an imposing creature, and when you are present, no living creatures wish to be so. The forest tried to keep you out, but you had to pass through deeper in. Why would it let you escape? You may never fully leave this place. Perhaps the best you can hope for is a glimpse of the world outside, through the edge of the trees, a world continuing on without you. And into the fifth gate we go. In the darkness, you imagined the worst terrors stalking you from afar. Dawn reveals what you've carried with you, how the journey has changed you. The sun rises, bringing an end to the night's journey. You find yourself close to the first path you took when entering the forest, following this priest as if in a procession. The night's frost sparkles, piercing bright. All of your worst qualities are laid bare, all your past misdeeds out in the open. Can you really go back to your former life if you were to leave this forest? Abelardo, I believe this is to you. Could you go back? Here you are followed by your most promising acolyte. Surely you now have a new altar, this elk skull. You could resume life as a priest. Manifest by this censor, followed by the most loyal of acolytes.
For me, there's no physical return in the sense of a human body, fingers and toes and such. But to be a physical embodiment of what we aspire to, it's still possible should this acolyte choose to imbue my persona into the skull. And so I try to avail them of my ability to inhabit a person or animal and try to force my spirit within the skull through this acolyte's agency.
So that's a risk roll, I suppose, right? You are trying to convince this acolyte to perform some ritual to imbue you into the skull. And so I guess, do you have any relevant memories?
I feel kin fits in here, that I'm skilled in oaths in the sense that I committed myself to this space, to this time, to this location. And that
I want to know who this acolyte was to you in life, besides simply an acolyte. Right? Were they your kin? Was that by blood or by oath?
Oh, entirely by oath. I'm not from this place. I arrived here and needed to take the time to make myself native to this place, to learn its nuances, to learn the language, to learn the space and time. And this person was essentially born near my arrival, and in a way we grew up together in the sense of learning this space. So now, in my absence, I'm looking to them to take my being and carry it on a bit further.
And this
to
is
hopefully help their persona, their population carry forth further.
So you are trying to convince the living priest of this, or the spectral acolyte?
I think it's the living priest, not the spectral acolyte. I thought, am I correct in remembering the spectral acolyte was kind of the intruder, or do I have it inverted?
Inverted.
Oh, I have it inverted, I'm sorry. Then the spectral acolyte is the one to whom I appeal for this help at this moment.
Okay, so I don't know that any of your current dirges are super relevant. In that you are trying to convince this acolyte to do so, and not do so yourself. And so I don't think inhabit is super relevant.
Okay.
But let's see, desperate prayers. You know what? As you take your attention from the living priest carrying the censer, which helps you manifest, he will drop it in fatigue. And so, regardless of whether this spectral acolyte agrees to carry this elk skull and bring you elsewhere, you will lose the ability to manifest your own form.
Interesting. So I'm sort of stuck within this fading sensor.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
You were but a wisp of smoke.
It's very true, but we're here at the fifth ring. I'm so close. I don't know if it's quite worth it.
Yeah, but if you convince him to carry the skull, you will have achieved your drive.
It's a good point. Heretic, do you have any other offers on the table?
I'm not sure I do. No, I'm not sure I do.
All right, let's push forth. So, my essence is likely to terminate here in this physical locale.
Okay.
Is that a risk 2 and 1, 2 light, 1 dark, or am I wrong?
Yeah, I think that's 2 light, 1 dark.
Ooh, 5 light, a 1 dark.
You could add another dark die and reroll.
It seems like this is the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, push forth. 5, 2, 2. 5 in the light, 2 in the dark.
I suppose you could still add another dark die and reroll?
Talk to me about Candlelight here. In Trophy, I'm amping up the physical risk by jamming up those dark dice.
Mm-hmm. You are.
What's the repercussion?
You're increasing the chance that you gain despair.
Oh, okay, so it gets darker, bleaker.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is my one moment to break free or be forever horribly doomed, so I shall push forward and encourage this acolyte to give all they have. A 6 on a light, not 5 on a dark, and it feels goddamn amazing.
So yeah, you gain hope. And I think, you convince this acolyte to carry forth, even as the living priest drops his censer at the edge of the forest, you convince this living acolyte that he can step forward from the forest with the elk skull, imbued with your essence, and preach the word to those who follow you. Or would have followed you.
That sounds gorgeous. I hope Torek notices this moment of transcendence and questions the desire for the hunt.
Torek, you see the spectral acolyte, and he steps forward to take the elk from your hands and step out of the woods. And in the distance, beyond the edge of the woods, you see the moldy ground of the town where your failed fight with the Vulture of Rot led to the destruction of the town. What in that town are you still scared to go back and face?
I think there was a church in that town. I don't know if it was where Abelardo comes from, but I think, in the long-running story of Torek's adversarial nature, I think the people of that town prayed to some deity or another for deliverance from the disaster that had befallen them. And I think very publicly Torek came to butted heads with the town's pastor over this, saying that this was a plague that could only be solved by work with their hands. And well, it was plain to see what good the work Torek did with his hands did. And I think of all the people that Torek is afraid to face in that town, I think the sort of judgmental gaze of the town pastor is perhaps the one that he fears most.
The edges of the forest reach out to you, beckoning, pulling you inward, just as they did while you were alive. Time, there is a place for you here in the woods, if you so choose. Or perhaps something remains incomplete, some task undone. What drives you out into the open, or do you choose to stay here?
Torek chooses to stay.
What is left of you after all has been lost in the forest? What drive remains?
Torek has always been a child of the forest, lived off it, lived among it, and in at least one way marked by it, scarred by it. And I think Torek did not feel, in later days, Torek certainly did not feel affinity for the world beyond the forest. Felt that there was something more waiting for him within it, and that's what's put him on the path towards his current drive to see the face of his deity.
And so here you are, at the edge of the forest, aware, under the shadow of every tree, of your antlered brethren, as they watch you. And here you choose to stay among them. What?
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's fine. And so that would bring us to the epilogue. So as dawn illuminates the events of this night, we want to know what was left behind and what remains a mystery. And so I want to know who sacrificed Torek on this altar in the first place. I have a suggestion.
Open to it.
I think Torek did so. But I think Torek was given a knife. And so you had an adversarial relationship. And I think you were told that any who committed ritual sacrifice on this altar would meet the god of the wood. And I think the only thing you had available to sacrifice was yourself. And so having been told that and been given a knife by your adversary, I think you sacrificed yourself to the wood, and so then became part of it.
I can see that, but to get to that level of futility, what does Tarek encounter, or what transpires that leads Tarek to that level?
Well, this is a memory of what happened, right? So yeah, what did transpire to lead Torek to that level of despair, deep in the wood at the altar? So that his death was the result of his own hand. Also, you can totally say that you did not die by your own hand.
No, I mean that. I don't hate it. It's an idea I'm kind of into.
I mean, your drive was to meet the face of your, or to see the face of your god, right? And your god was in the wood. You were a child of the forest.
If you want a totally different plotline to go with, you entered here as a hunter or a hermit, a wanderer, but skilled at relationships. Again, pushing this adversarial relationship between you and I, but what if you encountered me, and that somehow I was the antithesis of what you were seeking? Either the worst companion you could imagine in your hermitude, is that a word? Hermitage?
I mean, there's also the possibility that you preached God and civilization, which I do not know that Torek would have been able to hear.
No. I think that much is certainly true. I'm resisting the urge to suggest that perhaps it was Abelardo, because that doesn't feel like something they would do, even in an adversarial capacity.
However, the Acolyte was there to burn the books, so the Acolyte could certainly have done that, believing that they were acting in Abelardo's interests.
May I suggest give a moment and let's figure out what the hell murdered Abelardo and come back?
Yeah.
Sure. Abelardo. What was left behind and what remains a mystery? So what did you leave? And what sort of life do you have preaching from the skull?
What's left behind? There is a gourd filled with seeds. And in my last living, breathing moments, I pronounced a benediction over that gourd. And those who remain have planted those seeds in the earth, and they await to see what comes forth from that simple vegetable, fruit. What is a squash?
And I want to know who pushed Abelardo into the fire.
Ooh, good question.
We kind of all agreed that Torek had poisoned the tea.
I don't know if Torek came from a military background with a hierarchy, or even a sort of a pastoral background with familial allegiances, but it feels like somebody felt like the territory where I was trying to spread my theological seeds felt impinged upon, and that person felt the need to burn out whatever heresy I was trying to spread, and they pushed me into the fire in the hope works of burning out the seeds of what I felt like was hope. Although others would completely say that it was not hope but dissidence.
Perhaps the thing that pushed you into the fire was a rack of antlers.
I'm sorry, I missed a word there.
The rack of antlers? This
Antlers.
antlered
Ooh.
beast that has been following you through, and perhaps it was they who pushed you into the fire.
Yes. 6 little pinholes in my back. Not quite scorched.
Yeah.
We can agree. I mean, if you're at neither 6 hope nor 6 despair, which both of you are at, right? Like, your story does not need to end here, right? You are neither consumed by the forest nor drawn into the light. And so we can agree that some mysteries are unsolved. Like, this story is unfinished. Perhaps we don't know who sacrificed Torek.
For Torek, at least, I like that idea. That perhaps there is no answer to that.
And where I'm living, there's actually it's sunny right now, but there is a thundercloud going off above me, like, and so that had an epic kind of like, oh yeah, moment for me.
Well timed with thunder. I like that. And so yeah, here I think we end where the forest is haunted by one more ghost, and the elk skull that was the heart of the forest guardian is has left the forest in the arms of an acolyte who once sought to burn the holy texts of his order, and now brings the spirit of Abelardo into new lands. Yeah, that is where we end. So thank you for playing Candlelight with me. And yeah. Any questions, comments, concerns, feedback? Anything we want to talk about on stream, basically, in a post-mortem?
Just say out loud, that was a blast.
Okay.
Yeah, it's profound. There's a mental hiccup in hopping from rules mechanics of Trophy to Candlelight, but it's minor. In terms of sort of human aspirational growth, Candlelight is amazing. This notion of my character has ended, oh wait, not quite yet, I have one more thing to do, is unbelievable.
Yeah, I think the concept of this game is very, it's very clearly a high concept, and I enjoyed running it.
Thank you.
So I'm going to end the stream. So thanks for watching. I am Mags, and I will be streaming trophy-related stuff every Sunday going forward, and then starting in September, I will be streaming other games on Fridays. So yeah, tune in next week if you want to see something else. So I have been stripping the audio and uploading that to SoundCloud for actual plays, and then also uploading the stream VOD to YouTube. And so if you ever miss a stream and you want to go back, if you follow me on Twitter at MaxMaynard, then I certainly post links to that stuff afterwards, and so feel free to tune in, and I hope to see you again. And so also stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane, and also stay home and keep your kids home. Don't send them back to school. And yeah, Heretic, anything you want to plug at the end here?
Nope, nothing in particular. Just thank you for jamming tonight.
Thank you. And yeah, Brian, anything you want to plug?
Well, I make art,
Cool.
but whatever, track me down later.
Yeah.
Again, Max, thanks for hosting this as always.
Thank you. And yeah, have a good evening. And I'm going to end the stream as soon as I get my mouse all the way over to the stop streaming button.